2009. He grew up in the St. Louis area and has lived in China, Bolivia, South Carolina, and Paraguay before returning to St. Louis. So it sounds like he's got a lot of interesting stories he can tell. And so welcome. I'm going to hand it over to you. And if you need anything, please let me know. You should
Thank you.
share. You should be ready, set to share or whatever you.
All right. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah,
very
you
good.
Sound great.
Oh, very good. Thanks. So this is my name is Michael Berg. I'm the political director of the Sierra Club Missouri chapter. Appreciate this opportunity. We're in the middle of the legislative session. You can see behind my screen that's my girlfriend made that for me. That's the baby in the regulatory sandbox that's about to be passed in the Missouri legislature. But I think maybe I can go over some of the issues we're looking at that are happening in the legislature right now, and kind of also have a broad overview of what's been happening the last decade, which is generally not good. But one, to go over things happening. One is might as well just start and again interrupt. Let's talk. Let's have questions if you got anything. Imagine everybody's familiar with the Sierra Club. There's an excellent, very active chapter in our group in Columbia, the Mid-Missouri group. But you looking at, for example, with this baby here, we can start with the regulatory sandbox. There is a proposal that is just one step away from passing to make it so that if you are a business and you don't want to obey a certain regulation or law, you can apply to an entire new agency that will be created to one by one give exemptions to regulations or rules. I think it's a bad idea. Sierra Club is not a big fan of this. The people who support it say that there are certain tech industries, that there are certain financial disclosures and certain things that are really onerous for small firms, and big firms can deal with them. So our response is, okay, just make sure the DNR is not part of it then. I don't know what tech firm needs to be exempted from water or hazardous waste or air rules. Let's exempt the DNR. And they haven't done that. So it's not good. We did manage through fighting over the last couple of years. The original, so under this regulatory sandbox, if you are applying for an exemption, any agency that will be affected will have to look at to see if it can be done without hurting the public. And originally it would only give the agency 15 days from getting the request to see that, which is crazy. I mean, individuals are hard to act in 15 days, to mow the lawn, much less look to see about breaking a rule.
Yeah, what if you had to do some kind of a soil test or a water quality or any kind of thing? There's not time. 2 weeks? No way.
No. So we've got that's 60 days now, which is much better. There was no public disclosure before. Now they have to put the people in it on a website. Still a very bad idea. What we really want is just make explicit that you're not going to go below EPA standards for the DNR. It's not in there. So that is one step away from being passed in the Senate. That's House Bill 268. And what I can do is we have fact sheets, so I can put them up as I talk about things. Our intern went through the fact sheet I created. She was not really into having this crazy looking baby on it, so no baby on this. But I like the baby.
And we can also send this out in our weekly announcements. We can attach these, so that everybody gets them.
Well, good. The sort of source of all of them, I'll put that there right now, because then that probably makes more sense. Let's see, Sierra Club legislative fact sheets. Okay, and that's right there. So that's an issue I've been dealing with. We've been dealing with. Another issue. One is sort of like broadly the broad perspective, and this is the Democrat Club, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're well aware of the basic framework. But in case you weren't, like, it's a thing where Missouri Republicans who run everything won't bring up climate change, will not mention it, will not accept that this is happening. So like, there's a lot of bills affecting it. So I like to begin testimony just saying, I just want everybody to know that I saw an armadillo walking around Jefferson City. Do you remember when you were children, armadillos walking around Jefferson City? So that's sort of my slogan, make armadillos Texans again, right? I think that's a good slogan. But I've got the record every year for the last 12 years. There's been resolutions passed basically saying, boo Obama for doing something about climate change, yay Pruitt, like we attack on the Green New Deal, basically statements that said either we don't believe in climate change or we shouldn't do anything about it. And that's a really terrible thing, because I wish there was an actual like conservative party or like a reality-based different party. We should have debates about the proper way to tackle this, not debates or whether or not it's happening. But and a lot of the issues are going to be about clean energy. A lot of the issues we're looking at are about clean energy and some of the tricky business of transmission lines and siting of wind and solar. I know there was an issue, we're not real happy to happen a long time ago. Well, not a long, I think last year, about the move by Boone County to not allow the siting of, I believe it was wind. This was a while ago, but that's a Boone County issue. Legislative issue, there is a bill called, they call it right of first refusal, where big utilities are wanting to stop competition to put in transmission lines that we are opposing. It's kind of a Goliath versus Goliath. The big utilities want this, but a lot of real conservative groups like the Club for Growth and or the Americans for Prosperity don't want it, because they say it's anti-competition. So it was a weird thing to see. Like, I put out a tweet, who knows how long Twitter will last, but we're using that until it dies or whatever happens. And then to see like right away Donald Trump Jr. supporting our position, that was a strange, I guess a strange bedfellow thing, but it's a bad idea. So this is something that's important to us. Some other things happening that you might not know about. There has been there's a proposal, which it looks like it's probably going to die, to gut energy efficiency building codes. Basically tell jurisdictions such as Columbia that they have to greatly reduce their standards for energy efficiency for new homes, which is exactly the opposite of what we need right now. The best way to deal with climate change, the lowest hanging fruit is don't use as much energy. And the lowest hanging fruit for not using much energy, when you're making something new, make it right. So that is, the Home Builders Association have been pushing this. They call it House Bill 580. I can put that up. This proposal, and it's kind of part and parcel, and it basically says, the state of Missouri has no statewide building code, which is, I think it's one of only 3 states with no statewide building code, which is not good. So there are parts of the state where you could put 3 sticks together, call it a house, and legally sell it. Not that it'd probably be worth that much, but you could sell it. So that's why municipalities and counties, such as Columbia, have put these codes in place. I know, and they want to say it has to be at the very low standards. According to this bill, it would be it would bring it down to the 2006 level, the IECC level, if these standards were enacted, like every jurisdiction in the state. But it's pushed by the Home Builders Association. It's part and parcel of a trend, a growing trend of pushing and often passing legislation to take away local control. by the state government. It used to be a Republican principle to support local control. That's no longer the case. Every once in a while they say it, but they don't really mean it. But I think some of them used to mean it. I think a long time ago, a lot of them meant it. But now the philosophy is incoherent. The philosophy is basically stop Washington from telling Missouri what it can and can't do, so that us in Jefferson City can tell all the rest of Missouri what they can and can't do. That's basically the underlying philosophy. Another bill in that frame is that the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County passed ordinances requiring a new construction. It's also a codes type thing of parking lots, a certain amount for every parking space of EV electric vehicle charging stations, and the wiring ready for electric vehicle charging stations. There was some complaint about how it was done. It was actually, people took the complaints into account in the St. Louis County government and modified the code, which is the way local government is supposed to look. But there are certain people, and it's a lot of it is St. Louis County politics. There's a certain senator, Ben Brown, actually, who was elected because he wanted to keep his restaurant open during the COVID restrictions. And so he's railing against the county executive, Sam Page, in St. Louis County. So he sponsored the bill in the Senate. But this bill basically says, if you're going to do that, you can't do it. And if a county or municipality does an ordinance like that, they have to pay for everything, which is not the way an ordinance works. So this passed the House because as long as it's insane, it passes the Missouri House. But it seems to be stymied in the Senate. But right now, this bill actually has exempted all the states, the entire state except for St. Louis County and St. Louis City, which is kind of crazy to just pass legislation to tell St. Louis County and St. Louis City what they can and can't do. Although that's actually becoming more and more tradition, especially in the city. But it seems to be their St. Louis County senators who are saying we're not going to let this go through. But it's part of a growing tradition. And just when I'm looking at different things, 2015, in response to a campaign that we don't know whether it'd be a successful, a campaign by the Sierra Club in the city of Columbia that had just begun, they passed a bill saying you cannot put any controls on single-use plastic bags in the state of Missouri. That was sponsored by then Representative Dan Shaw, who was the head of the Missouri Grocers Association, who, because the grocery stores just didn't want to do it. And so now you can't do that. You can't, as you're probably aware, if you want to put health ordinances to protect yourself from factory farms in the state as a county or municipality, you can't do it. You can't have your own minimum wage. You have all of these attempts to do that. One that they're trying to push now, which we're trying to stop, is the Cryptocurrency Mining Protection Act. I guess because Sam Bankman-Fried was so successful in his endeavors. They need to protect this kind of thing. But, cryptocurrency mining worldwide uses more energy than the entire country of Argentina, which is a large and industrialized country. It is a major use of energy that produces no product except for invisible currency. Maybe, unless it's a scam and you can't get your currency back. So the cryptocurrency miners, it's now banned doing cryptocurrency mining in the state of New York. So like many things, they're trying to make it so that no local government can put any ordinances specifically to stop cryptocurrency mining in their area. Another attack on local control. And they just stuck it on a bill on Thursday. We're trying to stop that from happening. I don't have a fact sheet on that because I thought it was dead, and then they just stuck it back on something. So we're gonna fight this. But it's sort of like, it's also the kind of thing like, if you're just talking to people, are they saying, boy, I wish my legislature would make sure local government couldn't do anything to control cryptocurrency mining? Like, I don't think that's what people are clamoring for. But that's, yeah, that's what we're looking at. Another attack on local control that kind of went under the radar, but that was important to us a couple of years ago. You've got a big sort of debate about gas hookups, because methane gas, what's called natural gas, is a problem. It is a major driver of climate change. And when used in stoves, it's a lot of indoor pollution that hurts your lungs. I hear a lot of people saying it cooks better. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not real sophisticated. I put heat under something, I cook it, seems to work for me. But a lot of people says gas works. I don't know. But it's another thing is, it should be up to local areas to decide. The city of Berkeley and then a bunch of cities on the West Coast and East Coast put in ordinances that said that future homes must be all electric and not have the gas hookups, because the gas stoves and also heat pumps are in the long run more efficient better for the environment. They don't need methane gas. So they put these ordinances in the West Coast, East Coast. So the gas industry sees this as a threat. There were exactly 0 campaigns in Missouri. Unlike the bag ban bill, 2015, which was in response to something somebody was doing. This was in response to something somebody was doing 2,000 miles away. And there was no even campaign. But in 2021, the state of Missouri made it illegal for any municipality or county to put an ordinance in place for new buildings to not have gas hookup. So that was just the gas lobby doing that. The gas lobby has been doing all sorts of stuff like that, as have the different utility lobbies. So that's sort of the story of the whole issue of local control. Another thing we're looking at that hopefully we've got stopped, but has gotten hearings and is close to being passed if they wanted to, I think it would be filibustered, is a nuclear QIP, nuclear cost of work in progress financing. And that really affects those whose utilities are the large monopoly utilities, Ameren, Evergy, and Liberty in Southwest Missouri, the biggest being Ameren and Evergy, and the absolute biggest with their 40-something lobbyists in the Capitol is Ameren. And basically, although Ameren's kind of iffy because they don't know if they want nuclear power, but basically it allows utility companies, monopoly utilities, to charge ratepayers for a new nuclear plant as they are building it. I mean, usually when they have to build new energy, they get the money from the market, they get loans, and they build something. And then when it's built, you pay for the energy, and then they can be recuperated their costs through their rates, but they can't charge you before it actually exists. And the reason they want to do it is because Wall Street won't touch these things. In South Carolina, there was an attempt to build a nuclear power plant. I actually was living in South Carolina and was at the PSC meetings. I actually made the blank check. It's here it is. Here's the blank check. That was from 2008. But we told them in 2008, you're going to give South Carolina Electric and Gas all this money and you'll get nothing. You may or may not get a nuclear power plant. They built a $9 billion hole in the ground. No nuclear power plant was ever built. No energy created. The average rate paying home put in, or by the time they finished paying off, $7,500 per home in extra costs for nothing paid. In Georgia, they're about to finish the Vogtle plant, two new reactors, where they said it would cost $14 billion for the reactors, and it would be complete in 2017. It may be complete by the end of this year, maybe 2024, so that's 7 years late, and it will all told probably be $32 billion. So this is a real environmental issue, not only because we're worried about the radiation from nuclear, which has always been a big debate, but just even keeping aside the real issues of nuclear, because it is true, nuclear doesn't use the fossil fuels, but you can also have Chernobyl and Fukushima, which is not great. But just cost benefit, if we are putting renewable energy online, this Vogel plant puts 2,000 megawatts for 34 billion. Ameren just bought a contract for wind, 700 megawatts for 1 billion. So a tenth of the price per megawatt. It's just, maybe there is nuclear in our future if we have a long-term future as humanity, but the short-term crisis of dealing with the climate change, nuclear is not the answer. And the problem with the nuclear industry is not environmentalists. It is the costs. So this is something we want to make sure. Now they're wanting this to happen because they want to do small modular nuclear reactors, but it's an unproven technology that at earliest won't be available until the early 2030s. So we don't want them to be able to throw money like that. The other issues do want to, well, first of all, if there's any questions, add in. I will go down a rabbit hole of something that nobody kind of has followed, but is fascinating. But first of all, is there any question about any of this other stuff? I've laid out a lot of stuff. Yes. Okay. All right. So has anybody been paying enough attention to Republican talking points that they've heard of woke investing in ESG? Okay. Y'all are the few people, and I'm glad less people, because the less people who listen to this insanity, the better, because it's just, so they are going attacking woke investing, as they call it, which is weird, but want to go back. Maybe someone else can explain it better, but there has been a trend over 30 years in investing to have more shareholder activism, and part of the activism has been trying to make sure that investments are better for the environment, deal with workers' rights, and deal with governance issues, like don't support bribery and corruption. You have some of these standards are being used by the two largest investment firms on earth, BlackRock and Vanguard. Especially BlackRock's the largest. There are a lot of problems with BlackRock. The Sierra Club problem with BlackRock is they make pledges on divestment from fossil fuels and then they don't keep them. The Republican problem is that they're pretending like they do keep them and they think it's bad. But basically, the argument for what they call ESG, environmental social governance investments that they make is that in the long run, for example, fossil fuels, you can say invest in Exxon and the price is here, and we actually do implement something like the Paris Accords, and we do have this clean energy economy. Well, that's a bunch of stranded assets. The price is going to go down. Let's look for it. And if you control 22 trillion in investments, like BlackRock does, even shifting things a little bit with your investments can change the way the world looks physically. And it's bad for investors in the long run if Earth more and more resembles Venus as far as its climate. So this is sort of the background. I think some Republicans saw that Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, had some success in his last election, while most Republicans in the country did not. And he's been taking this war against Disney and woke investing, this kind of thing. So there's this push against ESG. There was this, maybe there is still this attempt to make it the new buzzword, like critical race theory and this kind of thing. So last October, then Treasurer, now Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick, I don't know if you heard about this, pulled over $500 million investment from Mosers, from the Missouri Employees Retirement Fund, pulled it from BlackRock Management and put it into a St. Louis-based firm like NISA, I think it's called. They pulled the money and had it managed by someone else. And we've actually got the numbers now in that, ironically, they're paying the St. Louis firm about 3 times as much as they were paying BlackRock to manage our employee pension fund. So, we would have no problem if they had said, if the reason given was, we think it's important that local Missouri-based investors, instead of this giant conglomerate, manage our funds. I think that's a reasonable. That's not what they said. He said the problem was BlackRock is engaged in woke investing, and we have to push back against the woke investing. And what he meant, if you look at the press release that he sent out, if you get past the word woke 20 times, and then you go to the other link, the only thing they cited for what the problem with BlackRock is, they said that they were using the proxy shares from Missouri to vote in a board of Exxon that they didn't like, to vote in a board of Exxon, which the problem, according to Fitzpatrick, was that this board slightly decreased oil exploration and slightly increased investment in renewable energy projects. So, first of all, if you look down deep after the rhetoric, it literally said that we pulled the money from BlackRock because BlackRock did a tiny thing to confront climate change, and we don't like it. Missouri should not be doing that. Now they claim it's about, they're putting this above shareholder value. No evidence was given that this new firm is going to get better returns or less risk. No argument was made that that's the case, which is sort of the irony of it. All these pushing all over the country actually cost money. So they did that. That BlackRock no longer manages Moser's assets. And so the legislature has sponsored, and they are pending, although the worst ones seem to be dead, but who knows, because there's games in the last few weeks. But they're sponsoring, and this is actually what I'm sending you here, doesn't get to the bottom of everything, because there's like 5 more bills I found, but a bunch of bills that in one way or the other oppose the state of Missouri being involved in any entity or putting any criteria for supporting criteria for environmental criteria, social criteria, or governance criteria. Now, bills like that have passed in different states, like West Virginia, Florida, and Texas. And they estimate what was passed in Texas is going to cost Texans over $500 million a year, because there's certain banks Texas won't work with if the banks are involved in any standards to divestment from fossil fuels. Texas won't deal with the banks. And so then when the municipalities issue bonds, they've just got less options, and they get a worse return for the bonds. And so because the Texas legislature has cost Texas municipalities and their taxpayers $500 million because of this. Although West Virginia has mines coal. Texas drills for oil. Missouri has no coal and no oil. So if something like this goes through Missouri, it's even dumber, because what are you protecting? You're protecting the right to export fossil fuels from other states, or to import fossil fuels from other states. So want to get a rundown on the kind of things, that's sort of a buildup about these 5 bills I testified on a few weeks ago, because I think people need to know the kind of things that happen. I think they're backing up because it was so bad, but there are 3 bills: Senate Bill 177, Senate Bill 316, and what is the other one? It doesn't really matter. 50, 177, 316. The 150 was by Mike Moon. Then the other 2 were by Eigel and Hoskins. And actually, Mike Moon's was the least crazy, because there were 2 others, 377 and 450. So these first 3 bills say that the state of Missouri, if they are taking on contracts with outside entities, which is the state of Missouri, of course, does all the time when they need things done, they do business contracts. If they have a contract they cannot put any criteria in the contract which would be anything to oppose fossil fuels, to support environmental protection, to support workers' rights, or to support or to oppose bribery or corruption, or support transparency. So it's literally we can't prejudice our contracts even based on bribery criteria, on the company's policy on bribery, or any of these other things. It also says you can't discriminate against a firm because of their policies on such issues. This is not a good idea. We should be able to do that. And in fact, the Department of Corrections testified that they've got a program where they vocational training to teach inmates for some of the things they make. They need a certain recycled material content, and they don't know whether this would cause that something to happen where they couldn't do this. This would also be against other bills that have passed, some of which I think are good, but others which are I don't like personally. But they had a bill saying that you can't have a contract in the state of Missouri if you're engaged in boycott against the state of Israel because of support of Palestinian rights. So this bill would contradict this. So those three bills had a hearing. At the same hearing were these other two bills, which were far crazier, which says that if Missouri is considering contracting with a firm, and that firm is engaged in certain boycotts, then the state of Missouri and all the local entities, these all apply to counties and municipalities too, must boycott these firms. And these criteria are, if the firm is engaged in any boycotts based on their support of dealing with climate change or any other environmental criteria, if that firm is boycotting firearms industries, if that firm is making any boycotts in support of abortion rights, or if that firm is engaged in any boycotts in support of transgender rights, then the state of Missouri or any government in Missouri cannot do business with that firm. So, which is so far out of line with the rhetoric of so many years about it's your money, do with what you want. The basic, obviously, it would cost Missouri a huge amount of money because there'd be so many less firms. The whole idea of this bidding process is you open it up, and the more bidders, the better the results are as far as quality and cost. Also, it applies to subcontractors too. So you would have to have what I think kind of a Stasi-esque, for those of you familiar with the old East German police state, you'd have to be constantly monitoring the private business behavior of all these firms. So that was heard. It did not seem to me that the bill sponsors had read their bills. These come from the Opportunity Trust Solutions, a think tank out of Florida. They're just handed. So you had these 5 bills heard. Now, this is the interesting part to me, because I know this is a lot to take in, but there's a punchline here. The first 3 bills said that you couldn't, the state or the local governments could not put these criteria, the state could not put these criteria on the firms that are bidding for, but they couldn't discriminate based on these criteria either. And the other 2 bills state that the state must discriminate against firms for a lot of the same standards. And then the chair of the committee heard all 5 bills together as if they were basically the same thing. So bills that contradicted themselves majorly were heard together as if they were the same bill. And then they said, even though there wasn't much, they said we had 3 minutes to testify. So the bell actually went off after 3 minutes, and I just said, all these bills would majorly affect the way the Missouri does business, and 2 of them directly contradict the other 3. So I think I'll need more than 3 minutes. And she agreed. And it seems like they have not gone anywhere. Mike Boone actually took famous lately Senator Mike Boone, because of his advocacy of child marriage. He actually took the bribery part of his bill, because I kind of dug into it. He was the only one who proposed it last year. So his actually was not as crazy as the others, although they're all bad. But you know, and it is an indication. I'm it's not moving, that these bills are not moving. But like last year, it was just Mike Moon filing this crazy thing. This year was 5 of them, and they got 5 hearings. The bill that is moving, which we are opposing, which is House Bill 863, it says that Missouri pensions cannot put any ESG standards on our investments, which they're not doing now anyways. So, but this just kind of like stops any administration in the future from being able to utilize the power of our pension to deal with climate change or other social issues. So it's not as extreme as the other, but it's totally unnecessary. And it is an attack on our ability to do anything in the future about this. We testified against this. And it also, the way it's interpreted could like, it's just another thing that people managing these pensions. It's not easy to manage these pensions. Just another thing they have to deal with. So we are posing. I'm actually, if you're interested, 11 o'clock on Tuesday, I'll be testifying in the Senate against House Bill 863. Welcome anybody else to come and oppose it. House Bill 863, hearing in the Senate 11 a.m. But so that is totally not necessary. It's part of this boogeyman thing, but it's not as extreme as the ones that did move. But I have to watch all these because some of these crazy bills are moving, did pass in Texas, and this kind of thing does happen. So these are the issues. You know, I can talk about other, especially things that have happened. Other thing, the IP process. I hope. Oh wait, are they still copying verbatim? Yes, that's the norm. They copy the verbiage verbatim. These, it was clear to me, and I don't know if any of the people are ever going to hear this, but that those ESG bills, nobody had read their own bills except for Mike Moon. Happens all the time. ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, the right-wing think tank, constantly putting bills in there. You know, and part of it, the verbatim thing, you know, it's a little bit unfair. And yes, Herb and Sue, I'll be done and then like to hear what your question or comments are. It's a little bit unfair because, you know, legislators are supposed to know everything and put themselves in everything. So including lobbyists or experts from outside are going to write bills or help you write bills. And I don't think it's necessarily wrong because how can a legislator know everything? But they should look through it themselves and understand what's in it. At the very least, you should read it. But you do have these right-wing bill kind of just factories churning these things out. Yeah. Herb and our Sue, you had a question?
I don't want to interrupt your presentation there. First of all, I think I've said this to you before. Thank you very much for taking on the role of political director. I appreciate that greatly. I mean, a reminder, Sue and I were up to our elbows in founding the originally Central Missouri Group, then Osage Group, then Missouri Group back in 1972. And I was first chair and Sue helped to run it afterwards. Quick question, then quick follow-up. One, are you spending full time in Jefferson City during session?
I am not there full time, but I spend much of my time monitoring, and I've been going there an average of once a week. So that is my primary responsibility. We also have a contract lobbyist we work with, Dawn Nicholas, who's excellent, who understands the ins and outs of the process better than me. So I don't know if you'd say full time in Jefferson City, but spend a lot of my work time it's more than full time these last 2 weeks. I'll tell you that.
Are there plans afoot for more continuous representation in Jefferson City?
It is a need, and it doesn't have to just be from the Sierra, but there is really a need. I don't know if we have more. We're trying to keep what we got. I mean, if you go there, you will see it is the corporate lobbyists just dominate, and there's just not enough pushback. And partly because it's in Jefferson City, where it's not a big city. I mean, it's a beautiful place, but it's not a big city. Yeah. Very, very good. Carl or Mari?
Yeah, this is Carl. Thanks for coming. I appreciate the presentation. I've always appreciated the work that the Sierra Club has done. I'm particularly interested in the building codes issue. You mentioned it was the low-hanging fruit, and I'm interested in the intersection between particularly the state government and local municipal government when it comes to dictating the preemption kind of things that you were highlighting. I've been in this fight for a long time. It was even prior to in electoral politics. I've always gotten the endorsement of the Sierra Club, and before that on Planning and Zoning Commission as well. And I can remember you said 2006 is when the last codes or where the codes are going to revert to.
If
right?
this passes,
If
yes,
it passes, correct.
which
And
I
it was
don't think it will.
It was about that period of time that I first started serving on the city council, and we started moving towards updating every 3 years with international business codes. I think that was under Bill Watkins as city manager. And we made quite a bit of progress until this hiccup. So where are we exactly? What did you say about how likely is this? Where is this now?
It's unlikely. It's unlikely, but it is scary that it had a hearing and that it is one step away from being passed in the House. And I know I said any crazy thing passed the House, but this is so out there that, I mean, we should be discussing a floor for the state, not a ceiling, a low ceiling for municipalities.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean to interrupt that. And particularly there was a couple of articles in I think it was the Missourian about radon, and radon actually played a role in all of this updating as well. And it was quite the controversy, and it's always been the home builders and primarily the home builders that have been pushing the excess costs of realizing these changes. Not mentioning at all the benefits to climate change and so on. It's always been very controversial, but we were moving in the right direction until this apparently has been pushed.
Yeah, well, I think we still are. I mean, this is just this is a push by the home builders, though, and this is kind of a message they're making. We have, it's hard to know how much what you do matters, but when we saw this was filed, our ears perked up. When it got a hearing pretty early in session, we engaged in action. We got, green builders, codes, managers, all these people from around the states, especially Kansas City, came out, and we pushed back, and people have come to the Capitol and pushed back. So whether this was a message that was going to die anyways, or whether our pushback really made a difference, nobody ever tells you, oh, we stopped pursuing this because you were putting too much pressure. But we wanted to make sure we put the pressure, took it seriously, since it's filed, it's passed committee, it's on the floor, and they, that committee, they just said the dumbest things. I mean, you had legislators saying this is about freedom, this is about freedom for the American dream, which is sort of like to build a lower standard house. I mean, their idea is, okay, you can buy the house for $5,000 less if you don't have these in place. So your freedom to buy it for less, but then the person you sell it to next has a less efficient home. You rent it out, and that's a big issue we see for renters. Renters look at how much they're paying for the month, and they don't know how efficient or inefficient the home is, and they're basically being taxed for something they really don't understand until they're getting into the winter and their gas bills out the roof. So, it's just, as a society, and this is sort of a broader philosophical issue, a lot of these Republican bills don't look at a society. It's like, I want this, I want to do this now, but like, as a society, these homes are going to outlast you. It's certainly going to outlast the original buyer. And so there is a moral duty on how it's built beyond just, I mean, I don't know how, that's what we have to determine how far it goes, but beyond just what the builder and the original buyer want. But yeah, I greatly remember a few years back, the work you did, Carl, and we got a great code in Columbia, and it's always been excellent on this issue and so many others.
Thank you. I appreciate your work as well.
So this is, I don't know how long I can talk about. This is the biggest stuff we're looking at this session. One other thing, actually, this is an interesting story because it sort of goes the way things work. And maybe I can tell about something that happened last year. I think that's probably a good way to finish it up. We're going to about 1, is that correct? Okay, perfect. So there is 2 bills going through right now to renew DNR fees, the Department of Natural Resource fees. It should be routine. If you don't renew the fees, you're not gonna have the money. This is fees for permits. And then the program can't function. The Department of Natural Resources has basically, the legislature has basically mandated that they have no rules stricter than EPA minimum. So they're already like at the edge of whether or not we're enforcing federal law. That is not the fault of the people running the DNR. That is the fault of the Missouri legislature. But the state of Missouri, through their DNR, through our DNR, enforces these laws under what is called delegated authority. There's a memorandum of agreement signed between the EPA and the state of Missouri that we will enforce the laws for the federal laws, and then the EPA won't send their own people to enforce them for us. Missouri is constantly kind of on the border of whether or not that is actually happening. So these fee renewals are important, but in these fee renewals bills, there was pushed language, 2 different things. One is a little complicated about guidance. It says that Missouri can't use EPA or DNR guidance when issuing that is binding for permits and regulatory actions, which Missouri doesn't anyways. So that's just sort of a statement. So the DNR seemed to have worked out a deal with that, I think. So we're not too worried, although that's not great. But also, one of these bills, there is a clause stuck in this necessary need to pass thing about fee renewals, saying that the state of Missouri will no longer enforce, they call non-point source water pollution standards, which the EPA says you have to enforce these standards. And this could, like, first of all, it could threaten the delegated authority. It also would make it harder to put controls on factory farms, because you know that no county municipality is allowed to do it anymore. And also would just stop the DNR being able to work with other states to address the bigger issues, which are not being addressed, that need to, about the sort of the dead zone, the hypoxic zone in the Gulf, and the nutrient pollution, and just trying to deal with these really major threats. So the fact that this was added, I went to a hearing on this last week, and they had the thing about guidance, which I testified against, but this part about the non-point solution was added to a bill in a Senate substitute. There was never a hearing on it. Never a hearing on it. And it was added to the bill, and now it's pending in the Senate. House bill, the Senate, and then we have to deal with it, conference committee. But this is one of major examples of something that was just not vetted in any real way, or the public has not had a chance to testify on it. And I like to bring that up because you're probably aware of the big fight about initiative petitions. The legislature is trying to make it harder to pass. The Republicans in the legislature trying to make it harder to pass initiative petition. There was a bill passed the Senate last night, will probably pass. So we'll have to try to stop that at the ballot, which I think is totally feasible. But often the Republicans argue, well, these things that the public put out that are not properly vetted. Well, here they stuck this thing in with no vetting. You had the public representation in 2016 on the Clean Water Commission was stuck into a Senate bill. No vetting at all. A lot of these things, they just sneak in bills and there's never any hearing. And so we're trying to make sure that gets out. But we'll see. You know, you had a bill last year to reduce hazardous waste standards for the state of Missouri, which also made it easier to start up so-called advanced recycling plant, which is generally actually just the burning of plastic. That you don't have to have a solid waste permit. Also, reduced transparency for the DNR. It was all in one bill. And the part about the hazardous waste and reduced transparency was actually passed, snuck into the Senate version, went back to the House. They never had a chance to even debate on the House floor, never heard in the House. I think a couple Democrats were going to talk in it, and they gavelled, did the PQ, the previous question, ended debate. So this major change in our hazardous waste law and our transparency for the DNR passed. And if you spent your entire life listening to every word that was said on the floor of the Missouri House, and every word said in every committee in the Missouri House, not a even single mention of this. You know, there was a hearing in the Senate, well, that was changed when it got to the floor, and there was a filibuster in the Senate, but literally no vetting in the House. So if you ever hear the argument, oh, the public is not vetting this initiative petitions the way we vet bills in the legislature, that's crazy, because you got hundreds of thousands of people to sign these things. I know a lot of people just know the general idea they sign, maybe they were tricked, but like sometimes these hearings just have 24-hour notice, which I honestly think they should be way less bills. If something's important enough to consider to be a law, give a week's notice, and just look at less bills a year. Give a week's notice. That way, if someone in Missouri really cares, they got a chance to take off work. It's the level I see it, like disrespect, hearings are canceled at the last second. The state is large. We're not in Rhode Island. The public should be able
they don't want people to show up.
Right.
It's not an accident.
It takes 7 hours to get from the Boot Hill to Jefferson City. Columbia's lucky that it's not that, it's a half hour, but like 2.5 hours from Kansas City, 2 hours from St. Louis. So this is the basics. Any other discussions? Anything else but people want to talk about? Questions, comments? Yes, I've got Mari, and then Sarah, and then Sue. Okay.
I just wanted to comment, but this is not exactly environmental legislation, but it is in a sense. One of the things that I'm real concerned about is there is a bill in the Senate Bill 522, which has passed out of committee. And then there is a companion bill in the House that would completely preempt all local regulations and ordinances regarding tobacco. So we would have to wind back all requirements for smoke-free workplaces and tobacco 21 and you name it. I think we would be back to the only requirement being to have a non-smoking section in restaurants.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And that is, fortunately it's a little late in the process, and I hope it doesn't go through.
It won't.
Because it's significantly different. The bill in the House is different. It only has to do with licensing requirements and some specific piece of the licensing requirements. So even if they both pass, there would have to be conference, I guess. But anyway, just to give you an idea of the lengths that the lobbyists are going, that's completely motivated by the convenience store operators. So.
Yep.
It's just like Michael was saying, how many Missourians want us to go back to having smoking in restaurants now that we've been enjoying not having smoking in restaurants? I think a lot of smokers probably wouldn't want us to go back to having smoking in restaurants or on airplanes. What are we doing here?
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, to the extent the press was covered. I try to get some press coverage. The hazardous waste bill said the people of Missouri are not clamoring for weaker protections from hazardous waste. That's what we got. Sue.
Yes. I know there's one of you, and you have someone that you also to help you on lobbying.
Yeah.
Do you have a consortium or a group? Do you have other environmental or liberal-minded lobbyists that you try to help each other and that you try to work together to some extent? Is there
Yes, but not enough.
Okay.
So first of all, we have a legislative committee, which is very helpful, volunteer legislative committee. A
I'm
lot
not
of
just
people,
saying within Sierra Club, I meant
right,
other organizations.
Environmental movement.
yes, well, not enough. So, you know, the Missouri Coalition for Environment has become more involved and they've actually pushed pushing a good bill about food deserts and about like tax subsidy for growing fruits and vegetables, which ironically is officially called specialty crops. Fruits and vegetables are specialty crops, unlike soybeans and corns. But anyways, specialty crops bill. It's about fruits and vegetables. Senate Bill 143. It's good, although Doug Ritchie basically took a crayon and scribbled on it in committee. But so working with them, there's Renew Missouri supports renewable energy and is doing lobbying. We, you know, and I'm concentrating on environmental issues, so not necessarily other liberal groups. So there are, you know, you have Jobs with Justice, some unions, Empower Missouri does some lobbying. And so there are groups, but it is woefully inadequate. Woefully inadequate. That building is run by business and corporate lobbyists. And that's something that the general public seems to like term limits, and anybody who spent their time working in a state house hates term limits because you have things like, okay, what happened to Illinois with Madigan is someone was in there forever and it was bad, and that is a danger if there aren't term limits. But when you have term limits, the only institutional memory and knowledge in the building, besides some staff, is the lobbyists. And the staff aren't supposed to be the ones who are going doing the wheeling dealing. They're the backup. So you have most of these people are only there for at most 8 years. And then some people get in the Senate 16 years max, mostly 8. And imagine if you had there's 197 legislators, but there's probably, a few thousand people in the building lobbying, doing things at one time. Imagine you got a business and the people who are charged with making decisions, the max 16 years, most max 8 years. And then you have people who've been doing this 30, 40 years, but they're working for the businesses. It's just a disadvantage. You just learn things. You can't even explain it all. You just do it long enough. You observe this long enough. You're going to learn things like any skills. And so not being allowed to have someone there as like a career, because you can't make a career out of being in the legislature, is, I think, not really good and puts even more power in the lobbyists. But your question is correct. We need more organization. I talk to I don't figure things out. I've got a testimony about cryptocurrency mining, testimony about all this ESG stuff. I don't just pull this out of my head. There are people who work at national organizations, the National Sierra Club. I talk to them to help me prepare it. I learn it. I really don't know. I'm not a specialist in anything. I just got reasonably intelligent. I can read and talk and think about things. And I know who to go to. But they're kind of flabbergasted with stuff going on. People in New York and California and in Missouri, and I tell them how many. But some of these bills, like this ESG bill, I was the only one in the whole state to testify against this. What? How can that be? Okay, send someone from Albany, send someone from Sacramento, put the money up, get 2 or 3 more people here. It's needed. It's needed, but it's not that there's no one, but it is thin. It is thin on the ground.
Well, you've been speaking for about an hour, which is usually our typical thing. Very informative. My gosh, I had no idea that some of this was going on. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. I don't think I've missed any questions in the chat. Somebody please do correct me. I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, so yeah, thanks so much for joining us. This has been really great. And then I'm sure Mari has got these links that you sent so that she can use attach the papers to our monthly or weekly email. Are you good?
I wrote it down.
Okay. Oh, great. Pam's
Yeah,
got it.
just write me if you need something else.
Sure. Great. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Great.
Right.
So thanks so much for your time. And with that, I think we're going to move on to our regular member meeting, which as far as I know, is just going to be announcements. We don't have anything else to discuss to my knowledge. So take it away, Pam.